The desert wind rolled across the horizon like a whisper from another age, a breath of sand and sunlight sweeping over the land where only the most determined conquerors dared to tread. When Alexander marched into Egypt in 332 BC, his army was weary but unbroken, seasoned by brutal campaigns across Asia Minor and the Levant. Yet here, in this ancient kingdom older than Greece itself, a different kind of victory awaited, not through destruction, but through destiny. Egypt had long been a jewel within the Persian Empire, but its people were restless, burdened by foreign rulers and longing for a liberator. When Alexander crossed the Nile and approached Memphis, he expected a fight. Instead, he was greeted as a savior. Crowds filled the city streets, chanting his name and laying wreaths before him. Priests in white linen robes welcomed him with sacred rites, proclaiming him not a conqueror, but a chosen king. To the Egyptians, Alexander was not simply another invader. He was a figure of myth, a warrior blessed by the gods. They saw in him a deliverer who had come to restore ancient dignity and cast out the Persian yoke. Alexander understood the power of such devotion. Where others conquered by the sword, he conquered hearts and symbols. And in Egypt, symbols mattered as much as armies. He embraced the local customs, respected their temples, and treated their priests with honor. He offered sacrifices to their gods, not as a foreigner pretending, but as a leader who recognized the spiritual power of the land he now ruled. His men watched with awe as he stepped into ancient sanctuaries, breathing in incense and mystery, blending Macedonian ambition with Egyptian divinity. Yet Alexander was not content with titles and rituals alone. He had come to Egypt with a greater vision, a dream of a city that would stand as the crown of his empire, a crossroads between worlds, a shining beacon on the edge of the world's greatest river and greatest sea. With his commanders at his side, he traveled to the Mediterranean coast, to a narrow strip of land near a small fishing village called Rakotis. The air there smelled of salt and promise, the sea stretching endlessly toward Greece, the Nile flowing southward into the heart of Africa. Alexander stood at the shore and saw what others could not, a future port that would bind continents, a capital worthy of immortality. He traced its outline in the earth with flour, marking where roads, markets, temples, and palaces would rise. His engineers and architects gathered around him, listening not to a king, but to a visionary describing a masterpiece. This new city would bear his name, Alexandria. Not a trophy, but a legacy. A place where Greek culture would blend with Egyptian wisdom, where scholars would gather, where merchants from every corner of the known world would trade ideas as much as goods. His generals did not immediately grasp the magnitude of his plan, but Alexander saw centuries ahead, saw ships docking at harbors that did not yet exist, saw students studying stars in great halls not yet built, saw his name echo through time. But destiny called him deeper into Egypt, toward the sands of legend. Word spread that Alexander would travel west, across the drifting dunes, to the sacred oasis of Siwa. There, in a hidden temple of the god Ammon, whom the Greeks linked to Zeus, lay an oracle capable of revealing divine truth. Many rulers had sought its counsel. Few had reached it. The desert claimed the unprepared without mercy. Alexander set out with a small escort. The journey was brutal. Heat shimmered in waves across the earth, sand buried tracks as soon as they were made, thirst crept into bones like a slow curse. Soldiers fell behind, eyes stinging, breath ragged. Yet Alexander pressed forward, guided by more than instinct. The legends say storms rose to shield him, that birds led him through the dunes, that divinity guarded his path. Whether miracle or myth, he reached Siwa. The priests welcomed him into the temple's shadowed halls, where walls whispered secrets older than Greece, older than Persia, older than memory. What was spoken inside remains unknown, a mystery sealed by time. But when Alexander emerged, his face was calm, his eyes filled with a quiet fire. The priests had addressed him in sacred tones, calling him not merely king, but son of Ammon, a child of God. Whether Alexander believed this fully, or whether he understood the power of divine legitimacy, the result was the same. His conviction sharpened. He returned from Siwa not only as a ruler, but as a chosen figure of destiny. When he came back to Memphis, celebrations erupted. Alexander presided over ceremonies blending Greek and Egyptian tradition, crowned as Pharaoh of Egypt, lord of two lands, unifier of kingdoms divided by time and fate. His authority rested not only on conquest, but on reverence. His rule began not in blood, but in devotion. Yet Alexander was not a man built to remain still. Egypt welcomed him, but the world waited beyond its golden sands. Persia was not yet defeated. Darius still stood, gathering armies and plotting revenge. Alexander could not linger, no matter how deeply Egypt embraced him. But before he marched on, he ensured his legacy would endure. He set architects to work, laying foundations for Alexandria. He established temples honoring Egyptian gods and Greek gods alike. He organized administration, secured grain supplies, built docks, strengthened trade networks, and left behind trusted officials. In quiet moments, he walked along the Nile, contemplating the river that nourished one of humanity's oldest civilizations. He watched fishermen cast nets, farmers tending crops fed by ancient waters, priests chanting hymns to gods whose names had echoed through millennia. Here, kings rose not only through force, but through myth and memory. Alexander knew he had entered a land where rulers became legends, where mortals were carved into stone as living gods, and he intended to join them. When the time came to depart, the Egyptian people mourned. They had known conquerors before, but none like him. He did not strip their temples or crush their pride. He lifted them. He did not erase their culture. He expanded it. As his army marched out, banners catching the wind, the Nile gleamed beside them like a golden thread tying him forever to the land he had claimed not by brutality, but by brilliance. The founding of Alexandria was not merely a chapter in his campaign. It was a declaration of eternity. He had conquered cities before, and he would conquer many more. But here he had created something new, something enduring. Alexandria would grow into a center of knowledge and power, home to scholars, astronomers, poets, philosophers, and leaders. The Library of Alexandria would rise, its shelves filled with the wisdom of civilizations. Lighthouse towers would guide ships across seas. Trade and culture would flow like water through its streets. Alexander left Egypt not as a foreign general, but as a pharaoh, a son of God, a visionary whose footsteps reshaped continents. Ahead lay battles yet to be fought, empires yet to be humbled, and a path that would lead him toward Babylon, India, and immortality. But Egypt had changed him. Its temples had given him divine legitimacy. Its people had offered him trust, and its land had inspired a city that would outlive him by thousands of years. The desert wind whispered as he departed, carrying with it grains of sand as ancient as time, as if Egypt itself sent a blessing or a warning to the young conqueror. History would remember him as a warrior without equal, but Egypt remembered him as something more. A king who saw beyond war, who built not only an empire of land, but an empire of culture and light. And in the heart of that empire, where sea kissed shore and sun rose each dawn, stood Alexandria, the eternal city of Alexander,